everyone, and welcome to Look Down There, the show where we talk about all the things we don't talk about. I'm your host, Michelle Amore. Today, you are in for a treat. My guest is a queer sexual assault and trauma expert media consultant and comprehensive sex educator, and has worked in mental health for the past 13 years in sex education and sexual trauma support. She is the host of the podcast Trauma Queen, which is for survivors of assault and their allies, and also the founder of Tending the Garden, a nonprofit for sexual assault survivors of different marginalized communities. But wait, there's more. She's also the co-founder of Centaury Co, which brings increased representation to intimacy coordination in film. Oh my goodness, my pen ran out of ink writing that intro. Please welcome my guest, Jimanekia Eborn. Hi, Jimanekia.
Hello. It always sounds so much cooler than I feel like I am.
Totally. I know. Like when you have your credentials read back to you, you're like, oh, I guess I am pretty busy.
Because I have been busy. I see what you're saying.
Yeah. Okay. I get it. I hear it now. Yeah. So, Miss Trauma Queen, what brought you to this work, this admirable fight?
Good question. Yeah. So I always like to preface with, I'm going to say a hard thing. So when I was 1 year old, I will always say, and I have been saying that I'm a child of trauma. When I was 1 year old, my mother was murdered in front of me by my sperm donor. I was raised by her parents. They always gave me all the tools and stuff that I needed. I was an early reader. So I've been changing the language. So feel free to use this. Instead of saying I was nosy, I just wanted to be informed. So I was a child that wanted to be informed. So I would read a bunch of stuff. I also am a Law and Order child, Law and Order SVU child. So with knowing everything about my mom, I wanted to work with domestic violence survivors. And so I went to college for criminal justice. I was raped my third year. And as most of us know, it changes a lot of things for you. I eventually, and thank goddess, was kicked out of that school. I had been trying because it was so much. It was a journey after that. And my journey is no one else's. But after I was raped and got kicked out of school, I moved back with my parents, my grandparents. I became a rape crisis counselor. I went to community college and I opened a vintage clothing store. Yes, I am a Gemini. And so that's kind of where I started. I was like, you know what? I need to figure out what's going on with me, because at first I didn't acknowledge that it was rape. So my journey has truly just been about trying to find out myself. And then on the way, I'm like, oh, this stuff is wild. And then saying it out loud and people going, yep. And then after working in mental health and, burning out every so 7 months, I got into sex ed around 28. And it has been a journey. It has been a privilege to work with from babies to 90-year-olds. I have seen the gamut between mental health and sex ed. And literally what I've always heard, regardless of where we are, is that people want to be seen, supported, and heard.
Yes. Yeah. And thank you so much for sharing that story. And I feel like that is something that is so healing for other people who have gone through trauma, who feel like they cannot talk about it. And what was it difficult for you to get to that point to where you were able to just talk about it as you just did?
Yes. Yeah. I was like, no, it's fine. No. Yeah. Right. I didn't tell anyone I was raped for 7 years. So it was so long not talking about it. And then being like, this is a part of my journey. I can't not erase it because it has affected so much of my life. And then getting to the point where I could say it out loud and then seeing my vulnerability, allowing hundreds of others to also feel like they could be vulnerable. That's a gift. And I was like, then this is it, right? My first job working with survivors, technically as volunteer work, was being a rape crisis counselor in hospitals. And that was the most humbling thing to this day that I've ever done. Someone, after being assaulted, coming into a stranger, letting me sit there and hold their hand and try to make it as comfortable as possible as they're getting SART kits. And I just knew that this was it. Like this, for me, this work is so fun. People go, what? I'm like, this is so fun. Like you get to literally sit with someone and see them find confidence and feel like they can ask for things and set boundaries and feel good. And like, that's so badass to see.
Yeah. To witness somebody coming into their power is such a gift. And I totally hear what you're saying with that.
It's so cool.
Yeah. So trauma is a word that gets thrown around a lot. It's very misunderstood, even poked fun at. So how would you define trauma? Because there's all different experiences that we all have that can use the same word. So how would you define it?
Yeah. Like I try to say things as easy as possible. It is an event that feels and is large enough to change and make shift into your life. Right? Like it is right? Trauma isn't always necessarily like a bad thing. Like you can have a traumatic experience and be like, that shook me, but it doesn't have to be ongoing. And then you have the different types of trauma. So it is a large event that is changing of your life.
Sorry, hold on one second. Yes, I'm recording right now. Sorry.
You're fine. You're fine. We're all doing it.
Okay. Yes. So you just said a big event in your life. Yes. Would you feel like, would you say this is something that impacts your nervous system, whether it's a positive or a negative impact?
I think everything impacts our nervous system, the good and the bad. So yes, absolutely. And I do believe that, say you have complex trauma, right? You might have had a situation that has been ongoing, right? Like it might be different types of traumas that now are intersecting and impeding in everything. So there is the variance of like, yeah, that was a traumatic situation. Like it shook me. It wasn't great. Would I do it again? No. Right. And you can move through it. But if you have the compound trauma or I'm getting my C's confused, compound trauma, where they are the multiple traumas, complex, the simple trauma, simple, everything is different. It's so we're building upon and you're trying to hold all of it together while trying to understand one and not acknowledging that there's all the intersections. And so for me, when I'm thinking about bodies, it's a whole circuit board. So if you trigger one point, you might throw the whole right side off. You might trigger something else off to not functioning in the ways that you need it to. So to answer your question, absolutely.
Yeah. And then also you mentioned trigger. So what can be a trigger, or how would you define trigger?
A trigger is a situation that can be affected by any of your five senses, which is really cool and also really shitty. And it puts you back into that same state where this situation happened to you. So you are having it feels like a reenactment of what has happened to you. And I think people are getting confused, especially on the socials. Everybody's triggered. And my question to people often is, are you triggered or are you uncomfortable?
Yes. Yeah. It is a word that is highly overused and misused. And I
triggered,
love
gaslight.
That.
I'm like,
yes. Yeah. Yes. Okay. So, and the trigger doesn't actually have to be the thing that you went through. It can be something completely unrelated.
It can be, but it will take you back. So the amount of what you're being triggered by or what you're being triggered by, it might just be like a something reminder of putting you in a different story. And then that story connecting to the trauma. So it will take you back to a situation of something that has happened. Now it might vary, it might look different, but within that state, again, everybody's body reacts differently. For some people, they're like, my stomach hurts. I get a headache. I remember the things. And those are like the physical things, right? Or it's just like, it's happening again. I don't want this. Like, how do I get out of this mindset? So it does vary, but I think a lot of people are not using it correctly.
Yes, agreed, agreed. And sometimes these triggers can happen and you may not even realize what's happening or why it's happening or what it's connected to. So that takes a while to connect the dots there.
Absolutely. I think that most of the times when we first are triggered by something, we don't know what's happening
Mm.
because you're so in it. And again, most of us don't wake up with tools to understand this. Like no one's like, here's that what if you get traumatized kit? Like, no, we are trying to figure out how it shows up in our bodies. Like I know for me, when I would, after I was raped and didn't tell anyone, I would go out and go to parties and drink. And my trigger was men that were similar to my perpetrator. And
Mm.
I would then physically snap and attack them. Right. Like everyone doesn't go into that state. That was my fight state. Right. I also, fawned. I fawned when I was raped. So everyone responds differently. And I wish that people understood that. They're like, well, I'm not really sure. You seem fine. Like maybe maybe they're dissociating, maybe they're fawning, and maybe that's the best way that they can take care of themselves in that moment.
Hmm. Yeah, and there's also kind of this comparative trauma, like, oh, what happened to you is not as bad as what happened to me, or what vice versa. Like, can you speak about that and how we can, move away from comparing our traumas?
Yeah, for what? like,
Right, right.
but honestly, it is interesting because oftentimes I see it as like people trying to connect and they're like, oh yeah, well, and then this happened to me or this doesn't happen to me. But also it could be for someone that they're trying to make themselves feel better and be like, well, I just don't want to take up space and this isn't that bad. And it's how they're just keeping themselves safe, maybe. And I think that even in just in general, we never know what someone else is thinking or what they're going through. And it can be a bad rep, but the comparison is not helpful to anyone because at the end of the day, we're all trying to navigate what has happened to us. We're all trying to understand it. And if you're constantly trying to compare or looking over at something else, it's never going to be the same. I was listening to something the other day and it was like, yes, every time you look over, the grass is going to always be greener. Why? Because of the angle that you're looking at it. The
Mm.
grass is the same green, it's just a different angle. And so the same thing with like trauma and survivors. It's like they probably still have a shitstorm that they're going through. It just might look like they're holding it together better, or they're at a different level, or maybe they've been working more. There's a lot of things that people don't think about because they're in the moment.
Right. Yeah. So, what is something that you can do? Like now you have this toolkit, right? And you help people develop their own toolkit. So, what is something that we can do if we experience a trigger and we can recognize it as a trigger? Like, what can we do in the moment to calm our nervous system?
Yeah, I think is because we can be triggered by any of our five senses. I think that we can also get back into our bodies with any of our five senses. So maybe you utilize a different sense. Maybe you saw something that threw you off. I keep rose oil in my desk and I'll be like talking with clients and I was like, guys, it's not drugs, it's fine. I'm just staying present with you. Maybe that works for you. Maybe you find, anything in that way that you can utilize. And also when you're like, I don't have anything else and I'm just outside, but I need to like help myself. If you're able to remove yourself away from other people, that might be helpful. Um, I'm a big wrestling fan, as many know. And one of the things, it's also quite petty, and it's like, go outside and touch the grass. Like maybe if you can literally touch the ground and physically ground yourself, or if you're able to go somewhere to just like have a moment. And if you can't lay on the ground, if you can get to a wall and put your back on it and just kind of take a few breaths, that might allow you time to be able to get to the thing that you might need to get to. And maybe that means, being able to text a person. Maybe that means being able to get to a safer space, but giving yourself like that time to just take a second to take a breath. And another thing we can also do, and I was talking about this earlier, is doing reality testing. When you're in it, like if you're able to, right? Like, I don't want to say like everyone should be able to. No. If you're able to, ask yourself, am I safe? Even say it out loud if that feels, am I safe? Okay, I'm physically safe. Am I emotionally safe? Is there anything that's going to harm me? Is there anything that can assist me in this moment? Like maybe that's a chair, maybe it's water, right? So just checking in with the things, it can be really helpful to being able to start to identify what your next step is.
Yeah. And I feel like there's the rub. It's like when you're experiencing this or you're experiencing trauma, the last thing you want to do is inhabit your body. But the only thing that can help you and heal you is to connect with your body. So that, I mean, what a challenge that is to do.
It is. I think it's the best and the worst because it's the journey. But I think when you're trying to do it, if it's not working, you can also give yourself the permission to be like, this isn't it right now. Right? Like people are constantly talking about meeting people where they are, but what if you just met yourself where you were?
Yes.
And you gave yourself that grace to being like, I really want to do this thing, but I don't have it. And maybe all I can do is sit where I'm sitting.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that's important.
Yes. Meet yourself where you are, just acting with compassion towards yourself.
Yeah.
Again.
It's easy to do it for others, but do it for you.
Yeah. Yeah. It takes this, it's so much effort to be human, Jimanekia.
Listen, it is. So I am exhausted humaning.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. Well, on the note of exhaustion, like,
okay.
Like we all have a lot to be exhausted and angry about as the fight for, basic rights, autonomy, that we have to keep fighting the same freaking fight. And, you are doing this really intense work with yourself and with people. And two questions for you. What is your self-care like? Because that you have to be like a beast for that. And then two, what is it that keeps you motivated and not just flaming out, but keeping the fire to keep fighting? So two big questions.
Okay. Let's go backwards. Yeah. What keeps me motivated is every time I turn the news on, I'm learning more about a perpetrator than the person that was harmed. And so I'm like, well, where are they at? Who's helping them? And having a support group that I host and have a co-host that at any time it's 11 to 12 people for like 7 weeks. And every time the stories are so similar. And the ways that they are continuously harmed and people showing up and not showing up for them is that there's so many of us. That keeps me motivated. And also in the same sense as still being motivated is I'm so tired of people talking about trauma and grabbing their fake pearls and getting into this whisper of where are you? And I'm like, what if you're just like, that fucking sucks? And they go, yeah, sometimes someone needs to just be aligned with you. We don't need to whisper everything. So if I get to just show up and be me and that helps people, done. What keeps me, how do I self-care? I love a good bath. I will have days where I'm like, this is really rough. I will take 2 to 3 baths a day.
Oh, wow.
That is I get serious. I spend time with my partners. That's really helpful. I have 2 amazing partners. I spend time with my friends and family, and I also spend time alone. I like being alone sometimes, a lot. Let's be realistic, a lot of time. And this is something that I have figured out is like, I need to every quarter, which it's time, I need to go away by myself. And for me, I'm in California, so I'll go to the desert, get a house, stay for a few days and just be. In cannabis, let's just be honest. And that it allows me in many ways to be in my body because I do have chronic pain, and it allows some of that to cease so I can be present. And it helps my brain to relax enough from all the trauma around me to get to create.
Mm-hmm. And what do you like to create?
Too much. No, well, I guess not too much. Conversation, Um, I love a pushing the envelope of why aren't we having this conversation? Who are we trying to protect here?
Mm-hmm.
And creating community spaces, right? Tending the garden was created at my first 10-day silent retreat. And it was created because I'd worked in mental health facilities so much and I saw who was not getting supported and those people actually needing more support. And I was like, this is bullshit. Like, I don't understand. They're paying the same amount. They're doing all the things. Why aren't they getting supported the same? And if I can create conversations and eyes to do that, that's what I want to do. I want to create intense, like my brainchild is the retreats, 5-day retreats where you get to focus on yourself because so many survivors are doing the work, right? Like we're all doing the things so we can help each other because who else is?
Yeah. Right. And you're doing the work while also, trying to maintain a regular life, right? So
Humanity's
something
hard.
yeah. I mean, really, I feel like healing is a full-time job. And so you're adding that into, your actual job and maybe family life and relationships or whatever. It's a lot. It's overwhelming.
Yeah, I feel that when I slow down. So maybe that's why I don't slow down as much as I truly should. So
You
that's when I
feel,
go and do the
oh,
hard resets.
gotcha. Got you. So your silent retreats, are you totally disconnected? Do you leave your phone or?
Oh, so I do a Vipassana retreat. Have you ever heard of Vipassana? So it's
No.
like a meditation retreat. They're all over the world, literally the whole world, and they're free. 10 days, vegetarian diet. The food is delish. You take your vow of silence and you learn how to meditate with your own breath and to be inside with your body and navigate. It is the hardest thing I've ever done and the best gift I've given myself. I've done it twice. The last one I just did in November. And the one before it was before the pandemic. And it's amazing that you have to sit and they don't give you like prompts. They're like prompts and like, here's what to breathe and like how to navigate the breathing. But every day your brain goes, you want to process relationships? And you're like, no. And it's like, so anyway, here's what you're like,
Yeah.
cool. But then you also can't talk to anybody.
Oof.
So you're just in it. There's no reading. There's no writing. You talk to, that's what always messes people up. There's no music. There's you and your thoughts in your body. You can talk to two people. You have a group leader and your meditation leader. You don't look people in the eye. They have like a walking trail. It's separated by men and women. Yes, because they only do, there's two genders, but we know otherwise. And they separate and you have like a little walking trail. You figure out your own system and it's, whew.
Oh my goodness. I need to talk to you more about this off
It's amazing.
podcast because we can really get distracted right now because I have a lot of questions. But thank you for sharing that. My interest is piqued. So what about polyvagal theory? Do you practice that? Do you teach that? Do you find that helps bring people back into their body?
I lightly do.
Okay.
Do I think it works? Yeah, I do. But I also think that all of these systems and things that are created, I do believe that they work, but I don't believe that they work for everyone.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so when people get into like, well, this is what I do. I only focus on this. Are you helping people or are you stunting people? Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, I do use it and use supports of it when it's needed. But also maybe this person needs more somatic things, or maybe this person needs art, or maybe this person needs to just lay on the ground, like, right? Like the continuous meeting of people where they are. So yeah, I do believe it works. I think it works better for certain people than others, just like talk therapy. I don't believe that talk therapy is the best for everyone. People go, what? And I'm like, yeah, it doesn't. Also, I don't believe that every therapist is a good therapist. Shoot me. It's fine. Anybody can pass the test.
I agree 1,000%. Yes. Yeah. No, I really like that you make that point because, self-care can look different for all of us. So self-healing can look different for all of us. And
absolutely.
And I think that when we get into it and we're like, oh, I'm doing all the things and like nothing's working, it can just compound the problem. And then now you're feeling even worse than you were before because you don't know how to heal either. But you haven't found maybe the modality that works for you. And
Yes.
and there's a lot of shoulds out there, like you should do this, you should do that, and that just kind of
Mm.
compounds the guilt, right?
Yeah. This is why I've been saying, like, we need to take healing off a pedestal. Like, what if we were like, how do we just navigate through this? Instead of like, what does my healing look like today? I don't know. Today I started my bath with an edible and a CBD bath. That's what navigating today looks like for me. But also, what does my healing look like? It might not be the same. Like where I'm at today might not be where I'm actually at. That might just be today. And so, like you said, navigating what works, because maybe one day something works and the next day you're at a different place. You got to do something else.
Yeah.
And what works for you might not work for me.
Yes. So now you got me thinking about pleasure, and that self-pleasure is different for everybody and what that looks like. And now I'm thinking about the importance of having a pleasure practice in dealing with your trauma, and how that can maybe help with the trauma. Not that people should or need to have a pleasure practice, but how can trauma and pleasure work in the same body?
Yeah. I think all of it is about us being in our bodies, right? But also pleasure doesn't mean sex. And I think people get that confused, right? Like pleasure could just be sensations. Like I feel good in my body because I can feel my body, which I think is super important. And I always, I talk about date nights and how do you reconnect with your body? Spend some time with it, because a lot of us spend a lot of time avoiding it.
Or judging it or hating it.
In the same sense, right? Like if I'm not feeling it, I'm not looking at it. I have always been and am still working through being an avoidant mirror person. I will avoid a mirror for what? I was in it. I don't need to look back at it for what? I don't need it. Right. And that is a thing for me. And I think with humans, just in general, we have to give ourselves the permission to be where we are. And I'm going to just keep saying it in that way because it's tricky.
Yeah.
But I think pleasure is important because we also need joy. For some reason, people are like, shouldn't you be sad because you were raped? What? Listen, if that's the case, so many of us would just be walking around looking at the ground.
Yeah, exactly.
We are allowed to have pleasure. You are allowed to have happiness. You are allowed to have sex if you want or don't want. And I think you navigate what that means to you. Like, is sex for you not penetrative? If sex for you, maybe not, maybe it's energetic. Maybe that's where your pleasure is. And maybe pleasure for you is kink, right? Like there's a lot of people that utilize that type of intense touch on their bodies. And I say, your life, your rules. I get it. I've done it. For me, that works. For others, it doesn't. So pleasure is something that you don't deserve. It's what you, because I feel like when people are like, well, you deserve it. Like you have to like reach a thing. Like it's just yours. Pleasure is yours. And it is there for when you want it and how you want it. Now of course you deserve a lot. You deserve peace, but we'll see how that's going.
Yes.
It's just the thing.
Yeah. So going back to mirrors.
Ooh.
So I started this podcast because, well, I call myself a recovering vulva hater. Okay. Looking at myself was just like, oh, the horror. And so I decided to speak about it and to have people on to talk about body confidence and really just encouraging vulva owners to look down there and decrease their shame and increase self-love, and let's talk about it, right? All the things we don't talk about. So when you have experienced a trauma in that area or an assault, this can be an impossible task. Do you have any tips, thoughts, recommendations on how to approach something like looking down there?
Slowly and honestly.
Hmm.
And when I say slowly and honestly, be honest where you are each day. And slowly as it doesn't have to be a one day thing. Maybe you're like, okay, I can look at the mounds, my pubic mound, and that's where I'm at. Maybe now I'm looking at my left thigh where I can see the crevice going towards. Maybe it's the right side. Maybe I can see a labia now, but I can't look at my clitoris. I think if you're able to slowly give yourself that permission and trust that each day you'll be where you need to be. I think it's hard, right? Because also society is like, vulvas are gross. And why are there so many names for them? I just don't understand. But I think you have to be slowly and honest with yourself. And then you can also talk yourself up. Like, how much power is down there? Like, this is a blessing. People pay a lot of money for your blessing, right?
Yes.
And maybe you find your own way to hype it up. Maybe you dress it up. I don't know, right? Maybe you do a clone of pussy and look at it that way. And that allows you to then look at it through a mirror.
Do a what of pussy? I didn't hear that.
A clone of pussy. Have you seen the clone of pussy?
Oh yeah, I did that.
Yeah.
Yeah, the clone of pussy. You know what? I had a really hard time making mine.
Absolutely. So I got another one. My pink one, I have a pink one. And then now they sent me another one that I want to do. And it's like brown.
Oh,
and it was like, ooh, skin color. Yeah, it's tricky.
It is.
But when you finally finish it, you're like, look at that. Huh.
Yeah.
And maybe that's the start because it's somewhat abstract, right? Because mine was all kind of, it's weird. But maybe that's where you start in looking at that.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Thank you so much. And I would also recommend if you're gonna try a clone of pussy, just buy 2 right off the bat. Yes. Because you're gonna mess one up.
Absolutely. You are. And make sure you read all of it. This is not where we skip our reading. We're not just going to guess, read it. Yeah.
Yeah. So I decided to do that like in secret and in a back room for my partner. And I put my pussy in a box for them. I was like, oh, dick in the box? No, this is better.
I love that.
Yeah.
I forget mine's up there.
Gift ideas.
Honestly, they're welcome. So if it works, try it out.
Yeah. Jimanekia, thank you so much for all of your work. You are a treasure and a gift, and I really appreciate your time and your offering here.
Well, again, as I told you before, when people ask me into their space, I think it is a gift and a privilege. So thank you.
Yeah. So Jimanekia, where can everyone find you?
Jimanekia everywhere. Don't go to Twitter unless you want to talk about wrestling. But JIMANEKIA on all your socials, and traumaqueen.love to find out about my one-to-one work, support group, and maybe classes I'm hosting. But between the website and Instagram, you'll find all the things.
Nice. Wrestling. Do you have a character that, like, if you were a wrestler, who would your character be?
Oh, I have no idea. I wouldn't be a wrestler. I would be a manager.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. Because I don't necessarily want to get hit. Sure. I'm here for the vibes. I'm here for the performance, but don't touch me. But I got a good mouthpiece. So I think I could be a good manager.
But come on, the costumes, like, wouldn't you?
Oh no, you can still be cute.
Costumes.
The managers are still also dressed down. I'm going to show up and perform, but I don't want to fly. I don't want to go through a table. Like, I'm good.
All right. I like it. Okay. Well, thank you so much for joining me, and everyone, make sure that you go and follow Jimanekia and like and love and share and subscribe, tell your friends, and also check out, totally blanking. Oh, check out Trauma Queen, Jimanekia's podcast as well. And yes, you can follow me at Michelle Amore or us here at I Look Down There. And remember that confidence comes from the bottom up. So grab a mirror and look down there. Until next time.